They tricked him into buying a worthless alien outpost, but inside lay a secret the galaxy feared. When Jared Timmons signed the deed transfer, even the AI clerk seemed embarrassed for him. The outpost was derelict, a gutted station on the edge of the Perseid Rift, long abandoned after the mining veins dried up. The brokers had laughed behind his back, whispering stupid human, desperate for a stake. He'd spent nearly all his credits. Even the docking bay smelled like mildew and burnt circuitry. "Congratulations on your purchase," the AI droned, its synthetic smile glitching. Jared wanted to believe he hadn't made a mistake. Humanity was new to galactic trade, still seen as naive, reckless dreamers. But he had plans. Maybe turn the station into a refueling stop. Maybe scrape by on cargo contracts. Something, anything, to prove Earth's people weren't just beggars at the galactic table. Then he found the door. Hidden behind a false bulkhead, deep in the maintenance shafts, was a hatch sealed with alloy far stronger than the surrounding structure. It didn't match the station's design at all. When he pried it open with a plasma torch, the walls hummed, as if something alive was stirring. Inside was a chamber lined with hexagonal nodes, each pulsing faintly with a rhythm that wasn't mechanical but biological. At the center floated a sphere, black as obsidian, flecked with points of shifting starlight. His station AI froze. Then, for the first time, it sounded afraid. "Human, do not touch it. This is not supposed to be here. The last records of such objects are erased. I advise immediate abandonment." Jared touched it anyway. The sphere unfolded, not into parts, but into concepts. Data poured into his head, fleets burning across stars, empires broken in silence, and one phrase repeated in 100 alien tongues: "The Wardens must never wake." That was when the first visitors came. Not traders, not scavengers, warships. A dozen alien factions converged almost instantly, each broadcasting the same demand: surrender the relic. Their voices crackled with fear, not greed. Jared stood in the cracked control room of his worthless station, the artifact hovering at his side, and for the first time in history, the galaxy looked at a human not with pity, not with mockery, but with dread. He keyed the comms open. His voice was steady, calm in a way that made even him pause. "You tricked me into buying this place. Your mistake. It's mine now. And if this is what you all fear, maybe it's exactly what humanity needs." The sphere pulsed, once, like a heartbeat. Outside, the alien fleets hesitated, unwilling to fire. Because every species knew what that relic could do. They remembered the last time the Wardens stirred, the galaxy had barely survived. And now, one human held the key. "Would you like me to continue this into a longer serialized story, multi-part, with factions scheming, humans discovering what the Wardens really were, etc., or keep it as a standalone short story punch?" All right, continuing the story from where we left off. Part 2, The Worthless Outpost Becomes a Throne. The outpost was no longer worthless. It was a fulcrum. Jared didn't sleep for 3 days, not because he couldn't, but because every time he closed his eyes, the sphere showed him things. War, not the clumsy push and shove of galactic fleets, but precise annihilation. Whole armadas folded into silence by the Wardens. Civilizations erased before their languages could even spread. And yet, the artifact wasn't hostile to him. It whispered, but not in threats. More like instructions. It wanted a keeper, someone to hold it, someone unafraid. The galaxy wanted it destroyed. On the 4th day, he received his first emissary. The Karath warlord appeared in his docking bay under heavy guard, mandibles clicking with barely suppressed terror. They didn't bother with diplomacy. "Human, relinquish the relic. Now, for your species' sake." Jared didn't move. Behind him, the artifact floated like a starless eye. "Funny thing," he said. "You people sold me this station for scraps. You tricked me, said it was worthless, and now you want it back? Doesn't feel very worthless." The warlord hissed, antennae twitching. "You do not understand what you hold. It is death. It is a prison that must remain sealed. If it awakens..." "It's already awake," Jared interrupted. The warlord froze. His guards took a step back. Jared noticed the way their weapons trembled. That was when Jared understood something crucial. They weren't trying to rob him. They were begging him not to use it. and that changed everything. By the end of the week, 3 more factions sent fleets. None dared fire. They orbited at a safe distance, each demanding, pleading, threatening, yet all too terrified to make the first move. Jared, one man with a half-broken station, had paralyzed an entire sector. The artifact pulsed, and Jared felt its intent: claim, build, defend. So he sent a message to the galaxy, not as a beggar, not as a minor trader, but as something new. This outpost is mine. If you want the relic, come take it. But know this, humanity stands with it now, and maybe it stands with us. On Earth, governments panicked. Human ambassadors were recalled. The media broadcast Jared's declaration across every colony. Some called him insane. Others whispered he might be the one to drag humanity into power by force of destiny. And in the dark between stars, something stirred, answering the heartbeat of the artifact. The Wardens were listening. Would you like the next chapter to focus on? 1. The artifact itself, what the Wardens really are, why it chose Jared. 2. The alien faction's scheming, backroom deals, assassination attempts, manipulation of Earth. 3. Jared's transformation, how holding the relic begins to change him and humanity's reputation. Part 3. The Keeper of the Sphere. Jared was no longer a man running a broken outpost. He was something else, something the galaxy had no word for. Every day, emissaries came, not just warlords and admirals, but priests, historians, archivists, all begging, bargaining, or threatening. Some offered fleets if he surrendered the sphere, others swore that if humanity kept it, Earth itself would be quarantined and burned. But none dared fire on his station. The artifact saw to that. Whenever a ship crept too close with hostile intent, the sphere noticed. Systems shut down, weapons melted, entire crews reported visions, dreams of endless black halls, doors slamming shut, silence so absolute it felt like drowning. They would retreat, shaking. And each time, Jared felt stronger, not physically, but in authority. His voice carried weight. When he spoke, even the galaxy's conquerors listened. On the 11th day, the sphere spoke directly to him. Not words, memories. He saw a war older than recorded history. The Wardens were not conquerors, they were jailers. They had built prisons across the stars, each holding something unspeakable. Civilizations had risen and fallen in the shadow of their silence. And then, they vanished. No one knew why, no one wanted to know. The prisons remained, forgotten, sealed. His worthless outpost? One of them. The sphere wasn't a weapon, it was a key. That night, Jared's comms lit up again, a private transmission, encrypted beyond anything his system should have been able to handle. The face that appeared wasn't alien, it was human. Admiral Liu of the Terran Union stared at him, tight-lipped. Mr. Timmons, you've triggered a storm you don't understand. The artifact is too dangerous. We've been warned about it for decades, quiet warnings, buried in archives we weren't supposed to have. You need to give it up. Jared leaned back in his chair. To who? To us, Liu said. To Earth. Humanity isn't ready for what that thing brings. No one is. We'll secure it, study it, keep it from falling into alien hands. Jared chuckled. And if I say no? The Admiral's silence was the answer. The sphere pulsed at his side. Jared understood the meaning without words. Humanity is being tested. Do you lead, or do you kneel? For the first time in his life, Jared didn't feel small, didn't feel like the dumb human who got scammed into buying space trash. He felt like a pivot point in history. He keyed the comm open again, voice steady. Admiral, tell Earth the truth. Tell them humanity isn't at the galaxy's mercy anymore. Tell them we hold the key, and if the Wardens ever come back, maybe it's us they'll answer to. Outside, the alien fleets shifted uneasily. On Earth, leaders debated whether Jared was a savior or a traitor. And far, far away, in forgotten voids where stars had gone cold, doors began to stir. The Wardens were not gone. They had only been waiting. And now, they knew their prison had a new keeper. Want me to take the next step into rocket the first alien assassination attempt on Jared? Puzzle piece the Warden's true prisoners, what they locked away? Globe showing Europe, Africa, Earth's reaction, fractured governments, cults forming around Jared, or secret plans to seize the sphere? Part 4, The First Attempt. The assassin arrived disguised as a pilgrim. Jared had allowed visitors under strict protocols, ships docked one at a time, weapons sealed by automated dampeners, escorts from the outposts, few refurbished security drones. The pilgrim came cloaked in silks, claiming to be a historian from the Thren Collective, carrying ancient songs about the Wardens. But Jared had begun to notice things others couldn't. The sphere whispered warnings like instincts sharpened to a razor's edge. When the pilgrim bowed low, Jared's hand twitched toward the sidearm he'd stopped needing weeks ago. The sphere pulsed once, cold and sharp. Danger. Jared didn't hesitate. Drop the blade. The pilgrim froze. His silks rustled, and a monomolecular shard slipped from his sleeve. Too slow. The drones fired, shredding him before the blade hit the floor. When the body fell, Jared saw what the galaxy feared most. The pilgrim wasn't Thren, not even close. Its skin shimmered as it died, fracturing into patterns like fractured glass. A shapeshifter, an Oriole. The Oriole hadn't been seen in thousands of years. They were supposed to be extinct. The corpse cracked apart, leaving no blood, no organs, just fragments of obsidian that dissolved into dust. The sphere pulsed again, not with warning but recognition. Prisoner. Jared staggered back. You mean, that thing was one of them? The sphere didn't answer. It didn't need to. The galaxy hadn't feared the Wardens because they were conquerors. They feared what the Wardens had locked away. The Oriole, and others like them. Things clever enough to infiltrate, patient enough to wait eons, and destructive enough that an entire ancient empire had devoted itself to guarding the galaxy against their return. And one had just walked into Jared's outpost. News spread within hours. Fleets pulled back, fearful not of Jared, but of what his artifact might be drawing. Inside his command deck, Jared opened another transmission from Admiral Lu. The woman looked pale, shaken. You don't understand. If the Oriole are moving, it means the prisons are breaking. That sphere isn't just a key, it's a beacon. You're calling them home. Jared stared at the artifact. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Steady, patient, not evil, not good, just inevitable. Then maybe it's a good thing, he said quietly, because if the Wardens don't come back to finish their work, someone's going to have to take their place. For the first time, Jared didn't just feel like the owner of a worthless outpost. He felt like a warden. And across the stars, in places no sane ship traveled, something answered. The real prisoners had begun to stir. Want me to push the next chapter into full galactic chaos, the prisoners breaking free and alien factions scrambling, or focus tightly on Jared's transformation as he starts to become what the Wardens once were? Part 5, Becoming the Warden. The galaxy was unraveling. 2 weeks after the assassin's corpse turned to dust, sightings began to spread. A mining colony on Valor reported entire families vanishing overnight, their homes left untouched, tools still humming. A patrol fleet near the Zorith Belt sent a last transmission. The shadows are learning our names. Every report ended the same way, silence. And always, Jared knew before the news reached him. The sphere showed him, not as visions, but as memories it had carried for millennia, the Oriole rising like a tide, slipping into governments, erasing species from the inside out. The Wardens had stopped them once. Now Jared understood why the galaxy had buried every trace of them. The truth was unbearable. The Wardens hadn't vanished. They had sacrificed themselves to hold the locks shut. Now those locks were failing. The alien fleets orbiting his station no longer barked orders or threats. They watched, waiting, terrified. When Jared opened comms, even the fiercest warlords didn't meet his eyes. They spoke to him as one would to a dangerous relic. And he used that fear. You tricked me into buying this outpost because you thought it worthless. Now it is the only fortress between you and extinction. So here's how it works. You stop treating humanity like dirt. You stop laughing at us. You stop calling us weak. You will send me supplies, soldiers, and tech on my terms. Because whether you like it or not, I'm your last line of defense. The channel went dead quiet. Then, one by one, acknowledgements came through. Not respect. not alliance. Submission. Earth, meanwhile, fractured. Half of humanity hailed Jared as a savior. Cults sprang up in colonies, chanting his name with the sphere's pulsing beat. The other half saw him as a tyrant in waiting, a man wielding powers that had ended empires. Secret fleets mobilized, assassins prepared. Even on Earth itself, riots broke out as people painted murals of Jared, haloed by the Black Sphere. Admiral Lu sent another encrypted message. Her face was drawn, exhausted. Do you even understand what you're becoming? You're not leading humanity, you're binding it to something we can't control. If you don't destroy that thing, you'll damn us all. Jared looked at her with a calmness that chilled even himself. No, I'm not damning humanity. I'm giving us a role. For the first time in history, we're not the weak ones begging for scraps. We're the ones holding the line. If the wardens are gone, then someone has to be them. And who better than the species that spent its whole history fighting monsters, sometimes even in the mirror? That night, the sphere pulsed with a rhythm he had never felt before, like approval. And for the first time, Jared didn't just see memories. He saw choices. Doorways, prison worlds mapped across the galaxy, locks failing one by one. The wardens had left more than prisons. They had left the means to rebuild them. But only a keeper could wield it. And Jared Timmons, accidental buyer of a worthless station, had become the keeper. Far beyond the reach of any fleet, something vast stirred. A prisoner older than suns stretched against its cage. And in the Rift outpost, the new warden opened his eyes and whispered, "Come, let's see if humanity can tame you, too." Do you want the next chapter to explode into a full-scale galactic war with the prisoners, or slow down to show how Jared forges humanity into the galaxy's new wardens, building alliances, training, and reshaping Earth's role? Part 6, The First Prison Break. The alarms came at 0300 station time. Jared jolted awake in his quarters, the sphere hovering at his bedside like a silent sentinel. The deck shook as if the rift itself were shuddering. By the time he reached the command center, the holomap was already lit with warnings. Prison World 14 Beta, breach detected. The sphere pulsed like a war drum, not fear. Summons. Jared stared at the data feed. For light years away, an uninhabited planet ringed with forgotten wardens' pylons had cracked open. What poured out wasn't a fleet, wasn't an army, it was wrongness. Sensor logs showed shapes that weren't shapes. Ships lost their own shadows. Crews reported hearing voices in their native languages, begging them to open the airlocks. And when they did, nothing human or alien ever walked out. Just silence. The prisoners were free. Jared called the fleets in orbit to immediate order. They were a patchwork of enemies, Koroth destroyers, Thren carriers, Solek swarm ships, species who had never stood side by side without tearing each other apart. But they obeyed him. Because they had no choice. "Listen to me," Jared said across all channels. His voice broadcast through half the sector. "You fear me. Good. That means you'll follow orders. We're not fighting each other now. We're fighting something older. Something worse. If you break ranks, you die. If you turn on me, you all die. You wanted a warden? Now you've got one. Form up." And somehow, they did. The battle for 14 Beta was unlike any war Jared had ever imagined. The prisoners didn't fight with weapons. They fought with perception. Ships turned against each other. Captains swearing their allies had fired first when no shot had been made. A Thren battleship tore its own hull apart because its crew believed they were suffocating in vacuum. Everywhere, chaos. Until Jared unleashed the sphere. It didn't fire beams or missiles. It simply spoke, a pulse of meaning that cut through every ship at once. His voice carried with it, amplified, undeniable. "Obey me. Not the lies. Not the shadows. Me." And for the first time since the wardens vanished, the prisoners recoiled. Hours later, the planet was silent again. The pylons glowed once more, resealed with power the galaxy thought forever lost. Jared stood alone in the observation deck. The fleet scattered in awe and horror. The galaxy had seen him not just survive the breach, he had done what no empire could. He had rebuilt a lock. But the cost was clear. Thousands dead, entire ships gone. And worse, the sphere whispered that this was only the first breach. 14 more locks were failing. On Earth, humanity fractured further. Some hailed Jared as the savior of not just their species, but the galaxy. Others demanded his head, terrified of what he was becoming. Alien factions debated whether to follow him or kill him before he grew too strong. And deep in the dark, the other prisoners stirred. The Oriole were only the smallest of what had been caged. The wardens had sealed away gods. Jared stared at the sphere, exhausted but resolute. "Fine," he muttered. "If you want a warden, you've got one, but we're doing it humanity's way, and we don't break easy." The sphere pulsed in reply, and across the galaxy, more locks cracked open. The war had truly begun. Want me to push the next part into 1. Globe showing Europe-Africa humanity's transformation, how Earth reorganizes under Jared's shadow. 2. Crossed swords, the galactic war expanding, other prisons failing, massive battles. 3. Puzzle piece, the truth of the prisoners, what exactly the wardens feared so much they sacrificed themselves. Part 7, the fracturing of Earth. For centuries, Earth had been the small voice in the galactic choruses, mocked, tolerated, dismissed. Now it was the Axis. And it was breaking under the weight. The Loyalists hailed Jared as the first warden of humanity. Colonies painted his image on their walls, soldiers wore his symbol on their armor, and fleets volunteered themselves to his cause. To them, he was proof that humanity was not weak, it was chosen. The fearful saw only ruin. On Earth's surface, riots erupted as leaders demanded Jared surrender the sphere before humanity was dragged into an ancient war it could not win. Nations whispered of assassinations, black ops, containment. They called Jared a tyrant in waiting, a man who would crown himself emperor under the guise of savior. And the opportunists, governments, corporations, mercenary guilds, scrambled to seize what they could. If Jared held the key to the warden's prisons, perhaps he could be bargained with, or betrayed. Jared watched all this unfold from Rift Outpost, his worthless station now transformed into the most fortified point in known space. The alien fleets still circled like wolves, but none dared to strike, not after 14 Beta. The sphere whispered constantly now. He no longer needed to touch it to understand. It fed him maps of failing prisons, locations of ancient locks fracturing across the galaxy. He saw them in his dreams, doors buckling, chains snapping. But it whispered something else too, something personal. "You are not keeper, you are becoming warden." Jared didn't know what that meant yet, but he could feel it in his bones. His thoughts sharpened, his instincts faster, his very presence heavier. People met his gaze and faltered. Admirals twice his age bowed their heads when he spoke. The sphere wasn't just showing him how to fight the prisoners, it was remaking him into what the wardens had been. Earth made its move on the 32nd day. A Terran strike fleet, cloaked and silent, entered the rift. They did not broadcast warnings. They didn't open comms. Their orders were clear: kill Jared Timmons, secure the sphere, end the cult before it consumed humanity. Jared knew the instant they crossed the rift's edge. The sphere pulsed once, and he felt their presence like knives in the dark. Instead of panic, he smiled. When their ships uncloaked, ready to fire, Jared's voice filled their bridges, direct, undeniable. "You came to kill me. Fine, but if you fire on me, you open the prisons faster. You doom every man, woman, and child on Earth. So here's your choice: shoot me and end humanity's future, or kneel and become wardens with me." Silence followed. For long, burning minutes, weapons locked on his station. Then one by one, the Terran ships powered down their guns. Earth's fleet bent the knee. Jared turned from the comms, breathing hard. For the first time, he understood, this wasn't about him anymore. Part 8, the cost of becoming warden. The Rift Outpost was no longer Jared's outpost. It was the citadel of chains. Alien fleets had fortified it with technologies humanity had never dreamed of: gravity lances from the Karath, bioforges from the Salak, memory cores from the Thren, all gifted in desperate tribute, so long as Jared kept the sphere beating and the prisons sealed. But each gift came with eyes. Spies, saboteurs, whispering voices who feared Jared as much as they needed him. And still, the prisons cracked open. The breach at 22 Crucible nearly broke him. It wasn't the scale, though 3 fleets were lost in the first hour. It wasn't the horror, though Crucible's skies burned with shapes that weren't matter and weren't thought, feasting on ships like carrion. It was what the sphere demanded. The prisoners could not be defeated with ships and guns, they had to be bound, and binding required more than firepower, it required sacrifice. Jared felt the truth pour into him as the Crucible breach widened. Unless someone offered themselves as anchor, the lock would not close. And the sphere didn't mean just anyone. It meant him. He stood on the bridge, fleets screaming for orders, the galaxy's eyes fixed on his next breath. The sphere pulsed in his chest now, as though it had become his second heart. He felt its will: give yourself, join the chains, become warden, fully. He almost did. But then he saw the faces of the humans around him, pilots, engineers, soldiers, people who had followed him into the maw of extinction, people who believed humanity wasn't weak, wasn't prey, wasn't a mistake. And Jared understood something the sphere hadn't expected. The wardens of old had given themselves, alone, silent, sacrificial, and in doing so, they had doomed themselves to vanish. But Jared was human, and humans didn't fight alone. He turned to his captains. If a warden has to bleed, then we bleed together. Humanity doesn't chain itself, we chain the monsters. They followed him. At Crucible, human soldiers linked their minds to the sphere's pulse, lending it pieces of themselves, memories, pain, hope. The chain was woven not from one sacrifice, but from thousands, and for the first time in history, a prison closed without claiming its jailer. The galaxy watched in awe as Jared's fleet returned scarred but alive. The lessons spread like wildfire. Humans had done what the wardens could not. They had found a way to fight the prisoners without dying as martyrs. And the galaxy trembled. Because it meant Jared Timmons was not just the new warden. He was building an army of them. But the sphere whispered, low and cold, in the hours after Crucible. Good, but the greatest prisoner has yet to stir. When it does, only one may chain it, and that one must be you. Would you like the next chapter to reveal? 1. Milky Way, the greatest prisoner, what the wardens feared above all. 2. Performing Arts, alien treachery, a faction that tries to seize Jared before he becomes untouchable. 3. Crossed Swords, the rise of humanity's warden core, soldiers reshaped by the sphere to stand against the impossible. Part 9, the greatest prisoner stirs. The galaxy had learned to breathe in Jared's shadow. Fleets now moved at his command. Worlds pledged soldiers and resources not out of loyalty, but out of sheer terror of what failure meant. Humanity was no longer an afterthought, it was the iron spine in a galaxy of shaking hands. But the sphere never let Jared rest. Every night, it pulsed with visions, not battles, not locks failing, something deeper, a single presence behind every prison, vast enough that the others were only its fragments. The sphere never gave it a name, only a feeling. A weight like drowning under endless oceans. And then, one night, Jared woke choking, clutching his chest. The sphere had gone black. No stars, no pulsing heartbeat. Just silence. He knew what that meant. The greatest prisoner was stirring. The alarms screamed before he could even stand. Prison World Prime, lock fracture detected. Jared staggered into the command deck. The holomap bloomed with warnings. But they weren't localized. Every prison flickered at once, as if something beneath them had flexed. Fleets scrambled, alien commanders yelling across channels, demanding orders, begging for reassurance. The sphere whispered only 2 words, cold and final. It wakes. The first signs came from the void of Aish. Explorers reported seeing stars move, entire constellations twisting like living things. Ships lost orientation. Then their crews. The last broadcast showed a captain weeping as his own reflection reached out of the viewscreen and pulled him inside. The wardens had not sealed away just armies or parasites. They had locked away an idea. A consciousness vast enough to seep into every shadow, every mind, every world. The other prisoners, the Oriole, the Crucible shades, the whispering phantoms, they were its fragments, bleeding through the cracks. And now the source itself was waking. The galaxy panicked. The Thren demanded Jared destroy the sphere before it summoned the prisoner fully. The Koroth warlords muttered about fleeing to uncharted space. Even Earth fractured again, some leaders begging Jared to return home and guard humanity alone, others urging him to lead the galaxy against the awakening. But Jared understood a truth none of them wanted to face. The Wardens hadn't defeated this thing, they hadn't killed it, they couldn't. They had only chained it. And now those chains were breaking. On the observation deck, staring into the rift, Jared whispered to himself, "If this is the thing that scared the Wardens, then it's the reason they left me the key." The sphere pulsed once, like a heartbeat resuming. One Warden must bind it, or all fall. And Jared knew, this war would not end with fleets or soldiers. It would end with him standing alone against the prisoner that even gods could not cage. Should the next chapter dive into 1. Crossed Swords, the galactic betrayal, factions conspiring to kill Jared before the greatest prisoner awakens fully. 2. Milky Way, the nature of the prisoner, revealing what it actually is, entity, god, weapon, or something stranger. 3. Shield, humanity's rise, the creation of the first true Warden Corps, preparing to stand at Jared's side against the final awakening. Part 10, The Knife in the Dark. The galaxy had always feared Jared. Now it began to hate him. Not openly, not yet. No one dared move fleets against the Warden of Humanity. But whispers grew in council chambers and warlord courts. If Jared falls, so too will the sphere. Perhaps the prisoner will sink back into slumber. Perhaps the locks will hold without him. Perhaps. And so the knives came. The first attempt was almost crude. A strike team of Koroth elites infiltrated Rift Outpost under forged banners, planting charges near the command nexus. Jared walked into the chamber before they could trigger them. The sphere pulsed. Their suits froze mid-motion, weapons locking in their hands. Jared didn't even draw his sidearm. He just walked between them, his presence crushing, their eyes wide with animal terror. "Tell your masters this," he whispered. "You can kill me, or you can let the galaxy burn. There is no middle ground." He released them. They fled, and the Koroth warlords began to whisper of curses, of humans who had become something more. But the second attempt cut deeper. Earth betrayed him. Admiral Lu herself appeared in his docking bay, unarmed, requesting parley. Jared allowed her aboard. She had been the one voice from Earth he still trusted, the one who had argued with fury instead of fear. They spoke for hours. She begged him to return the sphere, to step down before the greatest prisoner rose. "You're dragging us into extinction," she said, voice raw. Humanity was never meant to bear this burden. And Jared, tired, weary, almost believed her. Until the sphere whispered, "Poison." He looked at the glass in her hand, at the faint shimmer clinging to her lips. Lu's hand shook. She set the glass down, unable to meet his eyes. "I had to try," she said, "for Earth's sake, for all our sakes. One death, and maybe the locks hold another millennium." Jared stood in silence for a long time. Then he picked up the glass, poured it onto the floor, and crushed it beneath his boot. "You don't understand, Admiral. The locks aren't failing because of me. They're failing because they were always going to fail. The Wardens knew it. The galaxy knows it. You tried to kill the one man who can stop what's coming." She didn't fight when he ordered her confined, didn't plead, just whispered, "God help us all." That night, Jared stood before the sphere, alone. The betrayal should have broken him. Instead, it hardened him. Humanity had always survived by clawing through betrayal, through despair, through odds no sane species would face. And now it would do so again, at the head of the galaxy, whether the galaxy wanted it or not. The sphere pulsed, slower this time. He understood it now, clearer than ever before. One must bind, but not alone. You change the chains, you forge them of many. And in that moment, Jared realized the Wardens had been wrong. They had fought alone, one sacrifice at a time. He would not. The Warden Corps would rise. Not just humanity, every species that wanted to live. Soldiers bound not by fear, but by the shared pulse of the chains. The greatest prisoner would wake. And this time, it would not face silence. It would face a galaxy forged into jailers. Do you want the next chapter to show? 1. Crossed Swords, the birth of the Warden Corps, humans and aliens reshaped by the sphere into jailers. 2. Milky Way, the revelation of the greatest prisoner, what it truly is. 3. Fire, the galaxy's final betrayal, a coalition deciding to strike Jared before his Corps can form. Part 11, the birth of the Warden Corps. The announcement shook the galaxy like a supernova. Jared Timmons broadcast from the Rift outpost, his face stern, his voice steady, the black sphere pulsing behind him like a second sun. The wardens chained the prisoners once, they did it alone, and they vanished. I will not repeat their mistake. Humanity will not repeat it. The prisoners rise against all of us, and so all of us will chain them again, not as slaves, not as prey, not as fractured empires, but as wardens, together. Silence followed across the networks. The galaxy had expected arrogance, threats, domination. They had not expected invitation. And then, one by one, ships began to arrive. Not fleets, not governments, individuals, soldiers, pilots, outcasts, those who had seen the prisoners' shadows firsthand. They came not because they trusted Jared, but because they had nowhere else to stand. The first to kneel was the Rick, a Koroth captain whose fleet had been devoured at Crucible. He brought nothing but his blade and his vow. The second was Vera, a Thren scholar who had studied the Warden's fragments all her life. She came with knowledge Jared had never imagined, texts so old they were written in dying stars. The third was Kellen, a human marine dishonorably discharged for disobedience. He said nothing, just placed his hand on the sphere and stood ready. And they kept coming, from every race, every border, broken soldiers, haunted survivors, desperate dreamers. The galaxy called them mad. Jared called them the Warden Corps. The sphere pulsed as they gathered, not hunger, not command, resonance. It bound them together in ways no oath could. When one faltered, the others felt it. When one stood strong, all were lifted. It was not chains of iron, it was chains of will. And it changed them. The Corps learned to resist the prisoners' whispers, to fight through illusions, to anchor the locks with pieces of their own memory. They became something more than soldiers, not wardens of old, but wardens remade in humanity's image, stubborn, scarred, unyielding. For the first time since the wardens vanished, the galaxy had a shield. But with every new warden, Jared felt the sphere tighten around him. He was not just their commander, he was their anchor. If he fell, the Corps would shatter. The burden grew heavier by the day. His reflection lingered too long in mirrors. His voice carried echoes not entirely his own. The sphere whispered its warning again and again. One must bind, one must fall. Jared ignored it, for now. Because far beyond the rift, the stars themselves began to twist. The greatest prisoner was stirring. And this time, it knew the wardens had returned. Should the next chapter reveal 1. Milky Way, the first campaign of the Warden Corps, their trial by fire against a new breach. 2. Puzzle piece, the truth of the greatest prisoner, what it is, and why the wardens could never kill it. 3. Performing Arts, the Galactic Council's betrayal, a coalition of powers deciding Jared has become too dangerous, planning war against him and the Corps.